Welcome to That's Inclusive, where we talk about disability and what it means to live a full life engaging in our communities. What does that look like, and how can we work together to make our world a more inclusive place?
Hey everybody, how's it going today? This is Blake Tyler. I am the social media assistant for the New Hampshire Council on Developmental Disabilities. And we are here recording our next episode of That's Inclusive, which is our awesome podcast that you can get on Spotify, through our website, and a whole host of other places. And, the topic of today's meeting and session is May, which is Mental Health Awareness Month, as everyone probably knows, which is a topic that is really near and dear to me as someone who has anxiety and depression and a whole host of other things going on at the same time. Welcome to being a young person in today's world. And I'm joined by a very special guest and dear friend, Doug Marino. Doug, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me, Blake. My name is Doug Marino. My pronouns are he, him, and his. I work as a political consultant here in New Hampshire. Worked for different New Hampshire Democrats over the years. And I live in Brentwood, New Hampshire, and I'm a member of the Brentwood Planning Board. It was elected last March. And just a quick disclaimer, the views I express here are not in any way, shape, or form reflect the views of the planning board. I'm speaking in my own capacity. But yeah, I came to New Hampshire when I was 8 years old and just fell in love with this state and have stayed here ever since. And I'm working to get my master's degree in public policy at the Carsey School at UNH.
Thanks so much, Doug. And I should also throw out my pronouns are also he, him, his. And my views are my views, and they may or may not reflect the opinion of the council, depending on what we say by the end of this recording, I suppose. But, very lucky to have Doug on. I've known Doug for a number of years through my political work in the past. And I tell people Doug is one of my 5 favorite people in New Hampshire politics, which is a big badge of honor if you know me here.
Yeah.
I don't know, though, Doug, that I don't know that I knew you weren't originally from New Hampshire. Where were you from? Like, where were you born and raised the first 7 years or whatever?
Yeah, so I came here when I was 8, when my father's job was relocated. I was born on Long Island, in New York. I was born in Massapequa, which is a town on Long Island. So yeah, I came up here when I was 8, but still love Long Island, have a lot of family there, and love to go back to visit, but definitely fell in love with New Hampshire when we came up here.
So, what brought you to the Carsey School? And, just tell me a little bit about that, like your journey to get there and any kind of exciting projects you may be working on at the Carsey School.
Yeah. So, I graduated from my undergrad, UNH. I did political science, and that was back in 2018 when I graduated, and really just kind of went right into the campaign world, and, was doing kind of like campaign after campaign, which was, I had a lot of great experiences, met so many amazing people, and, got to help some really good people get elected. But it got to a point where it really took a toll on my mental health, particularly in 2022, 2023. When I was What was hard about it is, so I'll use Senator Hassan's campaign as an example. I worked on her reelection race in 2022, and the campaign leadership ran the most sustainable campaign I've ever been a part of. They made sure we had days off. We had, of course, we had health insurance, which we had access to mental health care, and they gave us a lot of time off, and so they were so good about giving us the tools to take care of ourselves. The problem is I didn't utilize those tools, and I put a lot of pressure on myself that wasn't healthy. And so I think that that's something that was a learning experience for me, is that, sometimes you're in a workplace where you have really great bosses and they give you the tools to take care of yourself. But I just wasn't accepting those tools, and I wasn't taking care of myself. And so after the 2022 election, going into 2023. I kept going in the campaign world. And I just kind of hit a wall where my depression symptoms hit like an all-time low. Um, or like I hit a whole time low. My depression symptoms hit an all-time high. I was like waking up every morning just kind of like dreading the day, and just kind of wanting to stay in bed. And um, I would, I would start crying. I didn't really totally know what I was upset about, which is a really confusing feeling. And so I realized that I had to make serious changes in my life, because so much of this was a product of me just not taking care of myself and taking care of my mental health, even when I had opportunities to do so. Like I said, on Senator Hassan's campaign, they took such good care of us, but I just wasn't taking care of myself. And so it got to the point in 2023 when I realized that I had to make some changes in my life and I needed to start doing things that had been putting off for a long time, things that would bring me happiness and fulfillment. And so one of those things was running for office because I've always wanted to serve. My dream is to, be a public servant and to help people. And so being able to do that, and get elected was really huge, but also going back to school and get my master's in public policy. It's something that I always kind of wanted to do, but there was always another campaign right around the corner. So I kept
Especially in
kind
New
of saying,
Hampshire.
especially in New Hampshire with the 2 years, everybody's up every 2 years except for our senators, our US senators. So there was always another campaign around the corner. And so I always kind of made an excuse like, oh, I'll get to it eventually. And then I kind of got to the point where I was like, I need to do this now because I think it's going to bring me some happiness, some fulfillment. Um, and so I made several changes in my life. I applied to the Carsey School and went and started going to the Carsey School. Took a step back from politics for a little while, started doing some work um, at the Institute on Disability at UNH, and also had a side job working at Strawberry Bank Museum, which was really cool. Kind of getting to, work with kids who are interested in history and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then gradually I've gotten back into the politics in a way that's healthy for me. And yeah, and I've been really enjoying the Carsey School. Had finished up my first year. I've got 1 year to go. And so for my capstone project at the Carsey School, I'm going to be studying the intersection of disability and mental health.
Which
Um,
is huge. Love to hear about this.
yeah, yeah, so this is something that I really want to delve into, because I think that it doesn't necessarily get talked about as much as it should. We've done a better job talking about mental health and a better job talking about disability, but we still don't always talk about them together.
It's like these two separate buckets in their own silos, and we don't realize that they are really interconnected and interwoven in our
Yeah,
lives.
yeah, definitely. So I want to delve into that a little bit more. And I still don't totally know exactly what that's going to look like, but what I do know is I want to learn more about it.
For sure. I want to circle back to that because I think that's a really interesting topic. But you said so many
Yeah.
things that just like as you were saying, they were just lighting up my different parts of my brain here. First of all, as a fellow former question mark campaigns guy, because I my day job does still require some electoral work from time to time, as you know, Doug. And so I'm not quite off the drug of campaigning entirely, but I've made it much more manageable. I think to your point about
Yeah.
sustainability, right? And it's really nice to hear from one campaign guy to another that the 2022 team that Maggie, Senator Hassan, had in place was so sustainable in its
Yeah.
model. Because as you and I both know, my first campaign was 2016. And back then, which doesn't sound like a long time ago for folks, but in campaign world, that is a really long time ago.
Yeah.
And it was a much different model. I mean, it was like a grinded out um, hustle culture, work 80, 90 hours, eat garbage junk food when you're putting in data at the end of a 15, 16 hour day, whatever it was.
Yeah.
rinse and repeat for like 6, 7 days at a time, right? Especially towards the end of the election. Um, and it wasn't until the 2020 election, and I'm sure COVID played a part in that, some social isolation and maybe early onset anxiety that I did not know I had at the time. Um, and, a lot of alcohol intake on campaigns, because again,
Yeah.
just the nature of the job is you're working those long hours and you are just exhausted and you turn to really unhealthy habits to cope and to have fun, right? I'm doing the air
Yeah.
quotes for those at home that maybe don't see this video, making air quotations with the have fun portion there. But it wasn't until 2020 that I really hit the wall. Like you said, when you hit your wall, I hit
Yeah.
the wall probably like 3 or 4 weeks out from the general election, which was a heck of a time to hit the burnout wall in the
Yeah.
2020 general election, trying to get Joe Biden elected. And I really made my first verbal call for help and said like, I need therapy. I actually said the D word for the first time, I think, on social media. I was like, I have depression. I am
Yeah.
depressed. And that, I don't know how it was for you, but like when I actually was able to sum up the courage to say that and to put that into words, not just for myself, but out into the world, that was a big step for me. Because before that, it felt like it was kind of this um, hush hush culture around it and like taboo to be like, I'm depressed, mental health, whatever. When really, when I posted about it, I had so many people from the campaign world, all these different campaigns that I had worked on, whether they were fellow organizers or volunteers, whatever it was, reaching out and saying like, thank you so much for like verbalizing that, because I also struggle and I have not known how to say it and to ask for help. I mean, we know when we need help. I think everyone in the world knows like, I need help on something. It's one thing to know, it's another thing to proactively ask and make that plea for help, right? Because it is a very vulnerable feeling.
Yeah.
And so for me, that was like the first time that I really made that verbalization. And then from there, like I made therapy a regular part of my life. I made running, I'm a runner. For the folks who listen to our podcast regularly know this by now, probably. I've just really found those much healthier outlets. And I stopped drinking a year and a half ago, about a year and a half ago. I'm rounding up a little bit, like a year and 5 months. We're getting to a year and a half.
Yeah.
And I really appreciated what you said about service and how you've always wanted to serve and be a public servant, because that is something that I found through gaining my sobriety and being in recovery, is that there were so many people in my life who really helped me get to where I am today as far as my sober journey.
Yeah.
And I just want to like pay it forward and pay it back. Um, and serve. Like I just want to be of service now and to help others. So I was really glad that that was also something that's really important for you, and that you said, especially in the mental health field, right? Like we said, it's still we're getting there, especially on
Yeah.
campaigns. Like we're really getting there, but much better. But it's still kind of taboo, and like you said, it's still siloed, especially in the disability community. Between mental health is one thing and disabilities is another, and it's like, well, actually, it's really interwoven.
Yeah.
So that just really lit up my brain. I was really happy to hear you say that. Why do you think, and you don't have to have a perfect answer here, I certainly don't have the answer. Why do you think the thinking is that it's these two separate buckets, both mental health and then the disability community?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And the honest answer is I don't know. Because I think that they're so interconnected in so many ways. But yeah, it still feels like we talked about them as if they're two completely independent things. And yeah, I don't really know the answer. I'm hopeful that we'll make progress there, because we have been steadily making progress in other areas on mental health and disability. And I'm just hoping that we can start to connect the dots and help people realize that these issues really are interconnected, and mental health is also interconnected with economic inequality and racial inequality and LGBTQ discrimination, and sexism, misogyny, so many things. So yeah, I think that we're getting there, but part of the problem, I think, is that mental health is still hard for a lot of people to talk about, and understandably so, because we do still have a stigma. And I think that a lot of people, I know I felt this way. I was kind of afraid to admit to myself that I was depressed. Um, it's something that it really took some time for me to come to terms that that is what I have been experiencing. And it did feel liberating when I finally, said it. It was almost kind of like the first step towards getting help, just to identify that I had, this problem that I needed to be honest with myself about. I'm doing a lot better than I was a year ago, but depression is still very much a part of my life, and some days are better than others. But I think what's important and something that I've learned to experience in terms of what I've learned to appreciate as I navigate my depression is trying to celebrate like the little victories.
Mm.
Um, even if something as little as just like, getting out of bed and going for a walk, or um, it could be really anything. But just kind of the, the little day-to-day things that can sometimes be hard, but learning to like celebrate those things and give yourself some credit for putting one foot in front of the other and just and keeping moving.
I agree entirely, and it's kind of nice you said that because we were reading this book at my day job about like the fundamentals of grassroots organizing, right? Like what makes a good grassroots organizer, what goes into a good grassroots organizing campaign, just the ins and outs and fundamentals. And one of them was celebrate your wins, no matter how big or small they are, because I think it's so easy, especially in the work that we do, and especially like trying to advocate for and advocate with the disability community. It's an uphill battle a lot of the time, and it's so easy to get caught in the grind and the feeling that like, man, nothing's gonna change, or this is gonna take a really long time to really see big impacts. But little victories stack up into huge wins, and I
Yeah.
think recognizing that, and we talked about that at work the other day, of celebrate those small wins no matter how small, because it will keep you motivated and feeling good and going, and B, it'll keep the people around you and the community around you feeling like they're part of something bigger and that they are really tangibly moving the needle on something. Um, because it is so easy in today's society to like get down on yourself and beat yourself up, and not step into your power and acknowledge those wins. I'm a big advocate of people stepping into their power, both at my day job and in my life, my personal life. Um, I was talking to a buddy yesterday who's trying to get into running, and of course he calls me because why not? I have apparently good advice on that. I wouldn't listen to me, but he wanted to, and he's like, "Hey man, like I'm having a really hard time. Like I can only run like a half a mile right now before I have to stop and catch my breath and whatnot." And I'm like, "Okay, but that's a half a mile farther than you were running like 2 months ago or 3 months ago, right?"
Right.
And to like, I think it's just about the way you frame things in your head,
Yeah.
and really recognizing that. And once I told him that, I was like, not to be too cliche when I told him this, but I was like, getting into running is a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah.
You know, he very clearly said he will never run a marathon, which as someone who's done one, I think that's a very wise decision. But, I'm like, and I think that's true of anything, any campaign you're on, any, day to day when I'm actively working through my mental health struggles and my depression. It is a marathon. It's not a sprint. Like I'm not going to wake up and feel amazing one day and be like, I'm cured. Like I know
Yeah.
down the line something could come up and I'm going to struggle with it, and that's okay. That's part of the process. It's all a process. Um, and
Yeah.
recognizing that who you are when you wake up the next day is not who you were when you went to bed the night before. We're a
Yeah.
different person day to day.
Absolutely. And I think that's something that can be hard sometimes, is showing ourselves, you know, that grace, and like kind of going back to the campaign world, because like I said, and I can't speak highly enough about them, like the leadership of Senator Hassan's campaign, they, were so good to us, gave us, like I said, gave us so many days off and gave us so much time to take care of ourselves. And, I was still putting all this pressure on myself. And when the election was over, one of the, members of senior staff high up in the campaign, said to me point blank, they're like, because we were talking about what, we want to do next.
Mm.
Uh, and so, and like I said, they took such good care of us. They helped us get jobs, after the campaign was over. They're just some of the most amazing people I've ever met. I just can't speak highly enough about them. But one of them did say to me, you have great employment opportunities ahead of you, but what I want for you more than anything else is for you to start being kind to yourself.
Mm.
And I think that that's something that in mental health can be really, really challenging because I can't speak for everybody, but for me, my depression often would, and still does at times manifest itself in kind of a self-loathing kind of way.
Yes.
And I think finding a way to show that kindness to ourselves is, it's an ongoing process, but it's such an important part of it.
I could not agree more. I'm the exact same way, honestly. Like I am. Everyone knows, and my therapist has said this before. She's like, you are so good at falling on the sword when it
Yeah,
comes to things, but you are really bad at giving yourself grace and giving yourself some extra rope and flexibility, right, when things happen.
yeah,
Because I am very hard on myself, both in my work. Like I wouldn't say I'm a perfectionist because perfection is unattainable, no matter what it is. But I am very hard on myself at work. I'm very demanding of myself as a runner because I have lofty goals and lofty ambitions and whatnot. And anytime I have like a bad run or a bad race or something, I'm really hard on myself. I really am. Even though I have to like kind of remind myself sometimes like why am I doing this? Like kind of recenter myself and rebalance myself. Um, and that part is tricky. Like exact to your point. And I think that's where the community around you comes in. At least it has been for me.
yeah,
Positive affirmations and people around you, but they can't always do it for you or be there for you. And I think
right.
once you learn to love yourself a bit, then you can love others, and that light will kind of radiate out from there.
Yeah,
And for me, I joke with friends that I'm like the most extroverted introvert I know, and
yeah.
it's so easy to like
I
fall
get that
into
sometimes.
lean into
Yeah,
that introvert side, right, and just stay home. Like just as happy staying home reading a book all night as I am to go to a gathering or go to a group run or whatever. Um,
yeah.
but I always feel better once I am surrounded by those people, like you said, or once you go out for a walk or something. Um, as someone who's worked in politics and you work in politics, what is something that you wish either campaigns do better? And it sounds like Maggie's campaign was fantastic, but in general, campaigns would do better, or that politicians could do better, like public policy side of it. Like, what big things do you think we should be advocating for, and that the disability community should be demanding of their elected officials?
Yeah. Yeah, I really think that Senator Hassan's campaign was such a great model for how campaigns should be run. In addition to, giving us time off and making sure that, we had adequate health insurance that, so that we could seek mental health care, things like that. Um, the campaign also created a culture where we just checked in on each other, and we would talk to each other just on a personal level to see how we were doing. We really were all of us on the team truly were and are friends. And so I think that, and that culture starts at the top, and Senator Hassan is somebody who is super compassionate, and I think that to her credit, she hired leadership that was also super compassionate, and so that culture just kind of permeated the campaign. So I think that you know it, part of what I want to see other campaigns do is basically what Senator Hassan's campaign did successfully, and that's create a culture where it's okay to talk about mental health and where we're checking in on each other and we care about each other. Um, and like I said, the struggle for me was, even though they gave me all the tools I needed to take care of myself, I I wasn't utilizing those tools. And so I think that that's the for me, that was the missing piece. But I think that in terms of how the campaign was run, it was really a model of what campaign should do. You need to, make sure that people are open with each other and feel safe, talking to leadership about things like this. I do think the culture is moving in the right direction. um like I said, the my experience on the campaign in 2022, was so different than other campaigns that I've been a part of in the past. Um, because I started, as a volunteer back in 2008. The culture was just so different. Um, you know, it really people, because we all had this attitude that like we're changing the world and we need to just put in as much time as humanly possible. Whereas on Senator Hassan's campaign, they understood that you're not going to be doing your best work if you're not, able to take care of yourself. And so I think that, um, yeah, like I said, I can't say enough positive things about that campaign, and I really think that it's a model for how future campaigns should be run. And I think that although I'm not part of the campaign, I do think that Biden's campaign has a lot of these values as well, from what I've heard, which is a really positive thing. So I think the culture is moving in the right direction, but it's also up to us to make sure that people who are struggling with their mental health know how to utilize these tools. Because, like I said, our employers can help give us the tools we need, but if we're not comfortable asking for help, then there's still a disconnect there. And that's more of a cultural problem, that goes beyond campaigns and goes beyond politics. And so that's part of that stigma we were talking about that we have to address, so that when people are given the tools to take care of themselves, they feel comfortable doing it, and they feel comfortable asking for help, and they know that like that's okay. It's more than okay. It's a great thing. Um, so I think that the campaign culture is moving in the right direction, but the larger culture beyond campaigns, I think there's still a lot more work to be done.
Let's say Doug Marino was elected president of the United States. What would be your top 2 to 3? And you can shoot from the hip. You don't have to have these perfect. Top 2 to 3 like policies or initiatives that you would want to roll out to either break down those silos between mental health and disabilities, or to create a more normal and even playing field for the disability community. Because I think a lot of people view it as like they want special treatment. We got to do all these things, and it's like no, they just want to do the things that you're doing the way that you're doing it.
Yeah,
Like they don't want to be treated as special. We want to stop the word special, and they just want to be, right?
yeah.
Um, so I don't know. How do you feel about that? And what would you do? Let's say again, fun hypothetical of President Doug Marino, because I have full faith that you'll get there someday. And you got my vote. I'll knock all the doors for you. Like, what would you do?
Well, it, if we could get it through Congress, I mean, yeah, I think one of the big things is that we need a healthcare system that makes this kind of care more accessible. Um, so where, no matter who you are, you have access to healthcare, whether, regardless of your income, your ability, we need to treat this kind of healthcare and healthcare in general as a real human right. And until we do, there are gonna continue to be real disparities in terms of who can seek mental health care and who can, which people with disabilities can access the accommodations that they deserve. Um, so, you know, uh, until we have to move to some kind of, in my opinion, some kind of universal healthcare system, where we recognize healthcare as a human right. And I also think some of it is education. I think that we need to be teaching kids at a young age that our differences are not something to be afraid of, but there's something that should be both celebrated, but perhaps even more importantly, understood. I think that we, so often we are afraid of the things that make us different, when in reality, I think the things that make us different and make us unique are things that can make all the stronger if we learn more about each other. So I think that, it's a healthcare issue, it's an education issue, and the education really gets into that cultural side of things where we change the way that we talk about disability and mental health, and just health in general. So I think those are the top two things that come to mind in terms of changes that we need to make. Now, especially on the healthcare side, we're going to need some cooperation in Congress to make some big changes. I do think that the Affordable Care Act was a massive step in the right direction.
For sure.
Such a massive step in the right direction. But we all know that there's more work to do, because everybody should be able to have access to to care, regardless of your socioeconomic status, regardless of your race, gender, sexual orientation, your identity. It should be available to everybody, and we just and like I said, I think we need to be teaching our children in school to that to care for one another and embrace the differences that we have with one another.
I couldn't agree more on both fronts. And I'm going to start with the children one because I had something fresh in my head, and then I'm going to circle back to your first point. I tend to think, and I'm not a teacher, I am a soccer coach off and on, um, but I tend to think that kids don't recognize differences as negative and bad until they're told that that is the case.
Right.
Kids just like, I don't know if you ever watch kids like just playing with each other, like all different colors, all different creeds, all different genders. Some with disabilities, some not,
Yeah.
and they don't care. They're just kids having fun being kids. Division and fear and separation is not. You're not born with that. You are taught that, right? We're born with love. We are taught hate, in my opinion.
Yeah.
To
I
your
agree.
point, the education of the kids, and then on the healthcare front, and the friend that I'm going to reference here, I tend to think mental health, as far as getting it through Congress and getting these packages and policies passed, it's not a partisan issue at all. Um, to quote a friend that we both know about like paving sidewalks or potholes, there's no Republican way to pave a street, no Democratic way to fill a pothole, right? It's a
Yeah.
pothole, it's paving a street. And I really do view mental health as the same way. Depression and mental health struggles impact everybody. Doesn't matter, like you said, your socioeconomic background, your politics, um, where you live. Um, Everybody has it. And I think recognizing that is a first huge step to actually making tangible inroads. And I think that's why New Hampshire, you'll be able to correct me on this because you've done some work in the state Senate and in our legislature. Not as an elected official, to be clear, folks, but he did. He was on staff for the New Hampshire State Senate. So Doug knows how things move through the state house. My vibe in New Hampshire, at least, is that there is actually quite a bipartisan consensus on a lot of mental health initiatives, if you will.
Yeah. And even on disability too. I know I sound like a broken record because I keep singing her praises. As people can obviously tell, I'm a huge fan of Senator Maggie Hassan. But when she was governor, we became, I think, one of the first states, if not the first states, to ban the payment of sub-minimum wages to people with
Mm.
disabilities.
I did not
Um,
realize that.
yeah, before she became governor, it was actually legal to pay people with disabilities below minimum wage. And then when
That's
Senator
insane to me.
yeah, it's unbelievable. But when Senator Hassan became governor, she made sure that that was fixed. And I don't know if, I think we were either the first or one of the first states to do that. And it was totally bipartisan. It was unanimous in the House,
Mm.
unanimous in the Senate. When then Governor Hassan signed it, the signing ceremony had lawmakers from both parties. And it was just a really proud bipartisan moment for our state. So I do think that around issues of disability and mental health, there is bipartisan consensus, um and there is good work being done. But part of the problem is that our lawmakers can only do so much. Um, they have a huge role to play for sure, like I said, in terms of expanding healthcare, improving education policy, and things like that. But some of it also comes down to how we treat one another, which is something that that often goes, our elected leaders can set the tone. I do really believe that elected leaders can help move the culture. Um, but it also goes beyond politics too.
It really is a culture thing, right? It is rewiring collectively as a society that culture, and bringing in that empathy. And I tend to think, or maybe I'm a hopeless optimist, who knows, but I tend to think that if we each do our part to start to foster that empathy and that culture of acceptance and just treating people like people, that through time and over time, we will get to that place, as we start to stack up the number of people. And especially the younger generations, man. Like, you and I have both worked with young people in various capacities. Me as a coach, you in your work. The kids are all right, as I like to say. Like, they know what they're doing. They're very empathetic, and I'm really excited to see these young people kind of taking over. If any young people listen to this Zoom or podcast, rather, take over faster. We want you in charge, for sure. And so that to me is really encouraging to see, young people taking the reins, um, especially in the disability community. Um, I've interacted a couple times with someone named Jules Good, who's a name in New Hampshire
Yeah,
politics that does disability policy,
yeah,
and Mia Stagnone as well from Able, New Hampshire.
yeah. They're both amazing.
Really,
Yeah.
really trailblazing young people that are just, like I said, blazing a path forward in inclusivity and, equality, and it really, makes me very happy to see folks like that doing the good work. Um,
Yeah, and what's really cool about people like Leah and Jules is that they make a difference not just through their work, but also just the human beings that they are,
yes,
because they're genuinely just such good people, and just like the way they live their lives and interact with people, they move the ball forward that way too. So I agree with you. I think that there's so much potential. Um, in terms of the up and coming leaders who are frankly current leaders already.
right.
Um,
I was gonna
and,
say they are definitely leaders in the
yeah,
disability community.
and
Absolutely.
are going to continue to be leaders for a long time. And yeah, so I am also optimistic that the future is it's that the future is bright. I know it may not always feel that way because, like you said, there are so many things going on in the world that are just so tragic and heart-wrenching. Um, but in my heart, I do believe that brighter days are ahead. I truly do.
To circle back to the capstone, because we are sort of coming on time, and I really want to hit the capstone.
Yeah.
What I know, it's still in its process, and you're kind of formulating it, and it's kind of like a bread in the oven. We're not sure how it's going to come out yet, but we're excited. We know it's going to be yummy. We're not sure yet the vibes. What is your big hope with it, and what? How do you think you can take it once it's done and bring it out to the world to make it that impact that you're hoping to make with it?
Yeah, so my hope is to bring some more awareness because as we know and as we talked about, there are a lot of barriers to accessing mental health care. But those barriers are amplified for people with disabilities. And that's something I'm really hoping to bring attention to. Especially like for somebody with disabilities, if they have a mobility disability, it can be hard to even get to a doctor's appointment, to get to a therapist. If you're a person with a mobility disability and you live in a rural area, telehealth may not even necessarily be an option because if you're in an area that doesn't have great broadband, that can be another problem. Um, and so many of the hurdles to get to mental health care are just that much more difficult for people with disabilities to access it. And so my hope is to really kind of compile through like statistical analysis where those barriers exist, how bad they are, and hopefully bring some awareness to some policy changes that we can make to make sure that people who have disabilities can access mental health care. Um, because that's really my hope is to try to so what I'm hoping to do is look at other states and see if there are any states out there that have moved the needle on this issue. Look to study if there are other states that have a really low rate of uninsurance for people with disabilities. States that have um, protections in place to make sure that people with disabilities can access healthcare, and then see if maybe we can incorporate some of that into New Hampshire. Um, so that's really my hope, is to just compile a lot of information and hope that maybe it can lead to some bipartisan policy changes. Because like we said earlier, people on of on all sides of the political spectrum um, agree that this is a problem, and want it to be fixed. Because the reality is that whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, there's a good chance that you probably love somebody who has a disability. You probably love somebody who struggles with mental health, and we all want to help. And so I think what I'm hoping to do with my capstone is just identify what some of those solutions might be, and maybe we can all get behind them.
I love that. Can't wait to promote that, by the way. So once that is fully fleshed out and in process, or even ready to share and disseminate with the world, we at the council are very eager to help do that. And also, I just want to plug into the project when it makes sense, and to
Yeah,
help it along and hear it. I'm the data manager at my day jobs, numbers and statistics and all that research.
yeah,
That's my love language, man. You know that. And
definitely.
same thing as a runner. Like I get into the stats and the data, and
Yeah,
I can just nerd out on all that all day, every day. But I'm really glad we had the opportunity to record this specific episode, and that Vanessa, my boss at the council, for those that obviously probably know Vanessa, she is wonderful. She said I could go ahead and do this with you because she knew it meant a lot to me, mental health, and it means a lot to you.
yeah,
I firmly believe that I would not be here today if not for the people in my life that were there for me in those low moments. And that's just what I want to bring out to the world, right? Pay it forward,
yeah,
be of service. And I really do think this podcast can be of service, this episode. If two people listen to this episode and feel better about themselves and can maybe be more open and verbalize their struggles, then we've succeeded today, right?
yeah. And
Um,
maybe then those two people can go on and help two more people, and
exactly.
that's just how you pay it forward. So
100% could not agree more, my friend. Is there going to be ways, for the folks at home to tangibly follow up, to follow along with your capstone, or will it be promoted once it's done? Like how will that get kind of shared out with the world? What are you envisioning? Um,
that's a great question. The honest answer is I don't really know yet. So the best thing I can say is, stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
I'm gonna try and figure out how it's gonna work. So
I love Stay Tuned. Stay Tuned is
yeah,
great. We love the
leave it with a little cliffhanger.
anticipation. Like, ooh, leave the
Yeah,
people hanging for a sequel, right? And
yeah,
maybe once it's done, and we can like have a follow up episode down the line,
yeah,
where we
yeah.
dive
Totally.
into the capstone and some of its findings, and really bring that out into the world.
Yeah,
So I'm
totally.
really excited to see how that comes out.
Yeah,
That the impact it's going to make, because you already make such an impact in the work you do, man, and the people you talk to. Like I said, you're one of my 5 favorite people in New Hampshire politics. So
well, thank you.
um,
The feeling is very mutual, Blake. So thank
keep
you.
keep being you, and
You
that's what I
too.
tell people too. Like, you don't need to change a thing about you if you're listening to this episode. Like, keep being yourself. You will
Yeah,
naturally attract the people in your life that are meant to be there, and will help the energy you cultivate swim and sing along, as one of my friends once told me. And I really do firmly believe that.
yeah,
People are going to come into your life that help your energy swim and sing along and help you grow as a person, and you're going to be that much better for it. So that's kind of the message I hope to leave folks with today. You're going to be able to find this episode on Spotify, folks. Like I said, we'll have the transcript available. It'll be posted on our Facebook, on our Instagram, most likely, because Doug and I have to get a non-cringeworthy photo of the two of us to post on the Instagram for it. And it'll be, like I said, on the website and some other places that we will post about, let folks know about. Can't wait to see everything come to fruition for you, my friends. Keep doing the good work in Brentwood, by the way, as an elected official. Thank you for that.
yeah.
More young people in places of power is always needed. And I just really appreciate everyone at home that was able to join and listen in today. And Doug, really appreciate you being willing to drive over to Manchester today and record and and to talk about this really deeply personal, topic. I really appreciate the raw honesty and you being you. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for having me. It was it was fantastic.
Thank you for joining us today. I'm Vanessa Blaze, and this was a production of the New Hampshire Council on Developmental Disabilities, produced by Isadora Rodriguez-Legendre and Vanessa Blaze, with many thanks to Josh Hardy and the rest of the crew here at Concord TV. We love to have guests with differing perspectives. These views are personal and do not necessarily represent those of the DD Council.